Dave Brubeck, on an intermission like this, for you to share your energy in a vocal way is a real privilege. Nice to see you again.
Thank you, Leigh. Well, the audience has us fired up, so I have some energy.
Well, it was a capacity crowd.
Yeah.
And, it is still a capacity crowd as we see from here. You see, we're speaking from our broadcast booth, and we have a solid-state monitor.
Oh, is that how you watch the...
That's how we were watching you, but we were listening to you quadraphonically.
Wow. I'm anxious to hear this broadcast.
Just a moment out to talk about things. Just one long look over your shoulder for a moment to San Francisco Bay and that cycle. What can you share with us about those days? There are a lot of fans out there who, rest with you over the ages here.
I'll tell you, that's very much on my mind because the Book of the Month Club asked me to put together 3 albums for a box set. They have done one of Ellington in Fargo, North Dakota. Have you heard that?
Yes, and I read also the reviews that Whitney Ballier wrote.
Yeah, I thought it was a great record, and then they did one with Oscar Peterson and one with Louis Armstrong, and now they want me to do one with the old fantasy recordings, and that's the San Francisco group, so I've been listening to all the old fantasy tapes, trying to pick out what I thought was the most representative things to cut 12 LPs down to 3 for this box that they're going to send out. So, of course, I've been thinking about San Francisco and the old guys and what a great group we had in the 40s.
Names like Cal Jader?
Yeah, the late Paul Desmond. If you have some jazz fans, they'll probably know most of the guys because Dick Collins went from our group to Woody Herman and then to Les Brown, and his brother Bob Collins was on trombone. And then the young clarinetists of today consider the avant-garde daddy of all times to be Bill Smith, and he was with us. I'm going to play with Bill next week in Nice, France. So we get to get
complete circle.
Yeah, right.
Seems to me you met him in Nice not more than a year ago.
2 years ago.
Yes.
And I hadn't played with him since 1954. So I asked him if he'd come and play again with us in Nice.
Well, it's almost a complete cycle. Briefly, what was the climate for music in San Francisco then?
Well, we didn't work very much with the octet. We had about a job every year, which can't keep body and soul together. So I took the rhythm section from the octet, which is bass, drum, and piano, and formed the Dave Brubeck trio. And that could work, but it was less men to hire, and we didn't play nearly as complex music as we did with the 5 horns and the 8 guys. So we did play kind of interesting things, but I don't think as advanced. The octet was the most advanced group I'd heard in those days. I can say that because in the beginning it wasn't my group. It was just 8 guys getting together, and then they had to have a leader in order for us to work, and I was the best known of the 8 guys, so the promoter in San Francisco that finally hired us said, well, you got to use Dave's name or we can't do a concert. He'll draw a few people. And we did have one pretty good concert. Then we opened for Woody Herman when he came out, and the musicians started hearing us then. In those days, you had to have a band play the Stars and Stripes Forever or the national anthem, something, before the band could play, if it was Woody or Stan or Duke. So the Musicians Union knew that we hadn't had a job for so long, so they gave us that one crumb, and we played in the pit for Woody to open with the great Four Brothers band, and I saw the curtain keep opening, guys peeking out, wondering what's going on here. But they were impressed with us. And it's funny, the next Tuesday, I opened for Woody at Carnegie Hall in New York, and I just opened for him about 3 months ago at Symphony Hall in Boston. So it's still going on after 30 years.
Well, I imagine every once in a while you and Woody laugh a little bit about this.
Yeah, we'll
you
talk
playing
it
the
over.
Stars and Stripes on a standby.
Yeah.
Dave, at that time, of course, you really had met Paul Desmond in service.
Right.
You were in the United States Army.
Right. I was on my way overseas in the infantry, and Paul was in the band. And there's a band at the Presidio in San Francisco. And there were guys like Joe Dodge that later played with me, and Dave Van Crete was in that band. He was the tenor saxophonist in the octet. And also right near that post, kind of in the same area, was Pete Rugolo that was writing for a different band on the same post. So a lot of good musicians there. So I thought, well, I can audition for this band because I sure don't want to go overseas as a rifleman. And so they set up a session, and Paul Desmond happened to be the alto player. So we jammed. He said I kind of scared him. If you've ever read about that first meeting, and but he liked what I did, and so after the war we got together.
And it was quite a cycle of performances and relationship.
Yeah, 30 years we played together. Lots of recordings.
Excuse me, recently Phil Woods wrote a theme for Paul for full strings, and of course it certainly points the way to a kind of musical monument for a very elegant performer. You must have had some stormy times and some wonderful times. Your observation of Paul in, say, 100 words or less.
Oh, well, start with genius, and then where do you go? But very witty, great mind, very complex, and nothing that I've ever read about people that thought he knew him ever came close. He was. They only caught the fragment that he would allow them to know, but they would always. You got to be around Paul like I was 30 years, and then you start knowing this guy, and he really remained unpredictable when he wanted to be, and sometimes he didn't want to be because he would want to do something that was nostalgic or something. But right up to the end of his life, he could play a string of quotes or a string of fresh ideas whenever he wanted to go that direction. He was extremely creative.
Dave, from the past to the present, the current and the contemporary, there's a new movement out there, and you're a part of it. You're generating a lot of new music as well as drawing from your catalog of old. Your directions are international as usual, and you're traveling the world. How do you view the current music scene?
Well, this is a new group tonight with two young men playing the book. Like some of the things you heard on this first part of the program with the first performances, like Tritonus, which is a piece I've written for guitar and flute, which is about 12 minutes long just for guitar and flute. And I took some of the main themes out of that and just put it into the book, and that was the first performance of a jazz version of it. And I was really impressed with the way Jerry Bergonzi played on it, and also Chris and the new drummer Randy Jones, because that sounded pretty avant-garde for an old guy like me. You know what I mean?
You've got to be kidding.
But it's great to have these young guys playing my music because they know. Like Bergonzi's quick. Now, Paul loved Bergonzi's playing, and so
they knew each other.
They knew each other, and it's great that Jerry's playing in Desmond's old chair because Paul thought that Jerry was the most interesting young player he'd heard in years.
What is his background?
Well, Bergonzi can play every instrument on the quartet, and I don't let him get too near the piano. And you heard him playing bass some of the time. When Chris switches from bass to trombone, Jerry moves into the bass section, plays bass, And then he can play good drums. He plays fantastic piano, and he's just a completely trained musician. On top of it, he's got a creative flair for improvisation that's frightening.
Did he come out of any of the well-known music schools?
Yeah, he came out of Berkeley School of Music in Boston.
Well, this new scene is leading you down some interesting paths. And
Yeah.
as you look at it all, what are the rewards so far?
Well, tonight I was hoping that the group would gel. This is a tough place to break in new material, you know, when you're
Like Avery Fisher Hall.
Yeah.
Live and lively.
Yeah, and I would have preferred to work a week in a nightclub someplace where we weren't on the spot. But we came in, and I hope the rest of the night goes as well as the first set. There's a few rough things that will gradually be polished over, but I'm so pleased that two new guys could come in and play like they did.
And it's good to see Chris touring
My
with you,
son,
too.
it's hard to talk about my son, but he's tremendous to play. He's a great, lively, good-natured, swinging, and creative guy.
Well, it seems to me I heard him reminiscing in a way, or just reflecting on something you said. He does sound a little bit like the great Bill Harris.
Oh yes, yeah. He wasn't even aware of Bill Harris, and everyone keeps telling him that he sounds like Bill Harris. That's about the first thing I told him when he played trombone, that he sounded like Bill. And he said, "Who's Bill Harris?" You know, and so I hope he's heard some Bill Harris recordings, because they're kindred souls.
Well, on the first set, his passage, you know, on Lord, Lord.
Yeah.
Just sort of wails so beautifully.
Yeah.
Dave Brubeck, what a privilege to sit in along with all these people here at Orchestra Hall, as well as those listening, and premiere with you, the quartet.
I hear that you have a great jazz show. Boy, it's great that people are still like you, that would not give up. And I'll tell you something, jazz is right now in a very healthy condition worldwide. I'm playing 85 concerts, one-nighters, between now and the first of the year. And next week we leave for Europe, and we're touring Europe twice. I appreciate people that have hung in like you when rock almost dissolved all of us. And even classical music and in the recording companies and jazz had to take a back seat, and now the circle is turning, and jazz is coming back up. It's always been on the great wheel, and the most important American art form, and it's always going to be that way. But thanks to you, the public have kept aware of all of us and what we're doing. Thank you very much, Leigh.
Oh, Dave, thank you. It's nice to see you, always.
Thanks.
And to hear the evolution of Brubeck and Company.